and welcome to the Ohio Arts Council's Rife Gallery. I'm Kat Sheridan, director of this space, and I have two very special guests with me today.
Hello, I'm Tina Husted. I'm a board member for the Ohio Arts Council, and I'm also the second lady of the state of Ohio. So thrilled that you can be with us today. This is going to be an incredible exhibit. Over 3 years of time has passed since COVID started, and it was the idea to have the Beacon of Light exhibit so we can share some great art that was culminated during that time and throughout the state of Ohio. So we're really excited.
And
hi, I'm Katie Monahan. I'm a communications strategist here at the OAC, and I also had the privilege of serving as curator of this exhibition and executing Tina's amazing vision for this project. So I think we're ready to jump in and get started.
all right, we're going to get started with Michelle just here. Michelle Walks is from Canton, Ohio. Katie, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So Michelle is a multimedia artist. You can see there is a huge range of materials that she works with here. These are all sculptures that she created during the pandemic. She's also an educator and a curator herself. She talked a lot in her narrative to the Arts Beacon about how when COVID hit, she really focused on nesting and exploring the concept of shelter, which you can see in that piece there on the right, the piece on the right there. It's got a tent feel to it. The fur feels warm and comforting, and it just kind of elicits that feeling of safety, something that I think some of us were lacking during COVID. We were all a little worried, a little scared. So that's that first piece. The next piece is called Balancing Act. I love that it's made from metal. It's that steely reserve demonstrated there. And then of course we have Immersion. It's an abstraction of water, flowingness. What do you think, Kat? That kind of pairs into...
I think that everybody felt a little immersed, right?
Yeah.
I think that Michelle does a great job of taking really big ideas and pulling them into these really intimate sculptures for us all to really think about and kind of chew on what were our experiences, you know?
Yeah, on Immersion, I kind of felt like, each of us had a different feeling of immersion. For some people, it may not have been as difficult, but for others, that really tall piece of water, you might have felt like you're almost submerged. That's kind of how I felt a little bit. It was very difficult. So I love that piece. I think it really kind of allows for us to think of different layers and levels of how people experienced the pandemic.
And speaking of experiencing the pandemic, we have really a kind of seminal expression of that through Cheryl Glovish-Brickman here in these drawings here. So Cheryl talked up, actually I won't do it justice. Katie, please tell the story.
Sure. So Cheryl, this piece here, she calls it a selfie in pencil, and I think that she really she talked about how she lives by herself, and she didn't think that it would be such a big deal being in lockdown, being isolated during COVID. But about 2.5 months in, those brick walls started to feel like they were closing in, the blinds started to feel like bars, and you can see she really captures this tight, closed in, isolated feeling here. You can see the calendar pages ticking by as she sits there with her mask. And she just talked about how just completely isolating and sad she felt. However, you will see there is a glimmer of hope. She added that little blue bird there on the window as a small sign of hope amid the darkness. Tina, I know you had some thoughts
I think
on this.
that the look on her face is a feeling that many of us had, just kind of waiting, kind of wondering. It just really is so emotive to what we all experienced. I think it's just a beautiful piece that she put together to share everything that we were experiencing. Many of us felt this way, I think.
Yeah, great expressions of that feeling for sure. And also the kind of personal bit of it, this piece being love letters, like thinking about if you can't be near your loved one, how do you express that love? Can you do it in notes to them? I know on the OAC team, we were so fortunate to have Donna wrote us all letters regularly sent cards, and it was such a special thing. I know a lot of people did that, and it's a different level of care to take the time, and so I feel like this really expresses that too.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I thought of when I saw this is that people today aren't spending the time to write to each other as much. We text and we email, but this is kind of going back into and I felt like during COVID we kind of did that. We kind of went backwards a bit in terms of just getting back to the things that really mattered, being close with our family, sending these personal notes, and just this piece just really made me feel that way. I love this piece, and I love the coloring of it. It made you actually feel hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then I think we should go over to Amy Lewandowski. Amy is in Shaker Heights, Ohio, and believe it or not, these are watercolors on vellum, or on paper, pardon, and they are watercolors of objects, little bits and bobs that she picked up while she was taking walks. So a part of her kind of healing process or maintenance of self-care was to take walks and deeply immerse herself in nature. And so you can see that here. What's really kind of special, and Tina, Katie, and I were chatting about a little earlier, was, they're all kind of floating, right? They're beautifully arranged, and all of these objects are floating, and it makes you kind of think about how we all felt a little suspended, like without movement but still present. Is that fair?
Captures it, yeah, for sure.
I think the other thing as an artist that really drew me into her work is that for those who have used watercolor will really appreciate, and I sure hope that some of you that are watching today get a chance to come to the exhibit, maybe tomorrow or in the next couple months, but to see the detail of this work. And it is very, very difficult to do white as a watercolor artist. White is very, very challenging. And so the way she incorporated the whites and showed just the specific detail on the bark and on the branches and the various pieces, the nuts. I mean, it's stunning. It's really
masterful.
is. It is.
Yeah. You want to head over to Kevin?
Sure. So these are sculptures by Kevin Lyles. Kevin is a sculptor and an arts educator in Southeast Ohio. He teaches in the art department at the University of Rio Grande, and he also obviously is a very talented sculptor. Kevin works in metal and rocks, and he takes these materials and transforms them. We were talking earlier about how it's a hard material, but he transforms them in a way that feels tranquil and peaceful. And Kevin did a Zoom chat with our executive director, Donna Collins, during COVID. It was part of the Arts Beacon. Donna hosted these weekly chats with artists. And Kevin was talking about how at the time that he was creating some of these pieces, it was springtime. And he was out in nature, and he was inspired by the buds and the fresh life and the tiny bits and bobs that are signs of spring. And he typically works in larger formats, and we'll see one of his other pieces over here in a minute. But that inspiration inspired him to kind of create these smaller, more intimate pieces that were reflective of those tiny little spring-like new things, which I think is interesting. We saw a lot of that with the Arts Beacon submissions of folks who were looking at things with different eyes and maybe either exploring different mediums or exploring different ways that they approached their work. COVID, we talk about the gifts of COVID, and this was one of them. It forced creativity in a different way.
Yeah.
I think the other thing about Kevin is he certainly makes us feel like we're immersed in nature. And there's kind of some hope too. I like how the light goes through the pieces, and that there's going to be light on the other side, right? And that's kind of how we were all hoping and feeling going through COVID. The artist, though, he has a large piece installed at the Hocking Hills State Lodge, the new lodge. So if you're down there and you want to get a look at one of his larger pieces, you were mentioning, Katie, certainly take a look when you're down in that area.
So speaking of kind of going smaller, I think we have a natural progression here over to Molly Pope. And Molly Pope is in Farmersville, Ohio, and has this lovely display, kind of cabinet of curiosities of all of these beautiful little vignettes or little tiny moments, right? But I think Katie has the best story. I'm gonna let Katie tell it.
Sure. So one of the things that was really great about Arts Beacon and the Instagram account were some of the interactions that were taking place in the comments section. Artists supporting each other, members of the public supporting each other. And one of the really cool things was Molly posted that she had a show, a solo show scheduled for May 2020, and it had been canceled obviously due to the pandemic. And so folks were giving her encouragement. Among them was our very own Tina Husted, who was giving her encouraging words and also said, "Don't worry, Molly, we will be seeing your work again in person very soon." And so here we are. It took a little while to get here, but we are here 3 years later. It's come full circle, and we're so excited to be able to bring Molly's work into this exhibition.
And Tina, you were talking about the importance of language and how we have a couple of recent pieces.
Yes.
Did you want to say a little
No,
more?
I just think it's wonderful to have the written word kind of incorporated into the art. As Katie was saying, the word that comes to mind for me in her pieces are just tranquility. You feel just like you want to kind of sit under that tree and just be contemplative on what's going on in the world, and I think that she did that very beautifully in these pieces.
Yeah, Molly works with these boxes are all antique or reclaimed boxes that she has found. She said some of them used to hold dry goods. They're very old. Some of them used to hold dry goods from back when cardboard wasn't a thing, and so it's the ultimate in recycling. She's taking these trees that are growing inside these recycled boxes, which is really fascinating.
And for those of you who are viewing this, it really doesn't do justice on camera. You have to come see the exhibit. You really, truly do.
Yes, yes. And before we head out of this corner, we have to shift over and have a look at Charlotte Lee's. And we'll have the overview look, and then we'll look a little closer. But so Charlotte works in multimedia regularly, but there was something really special about these pieces in that she was gifted old organ pipes and created this series of phenomenal pieces. So these are all individual works that are hung in this way, and it functions both as individual pieces but also as a whole. And we were talking a little bit earlier about the musicality of what they look like. You see like just how it moves, and it signals to you the idea of sound. And then you also think about the history of the materials and what they were used for and how much sound came from them. It's just this layer upon layer that it's really joyful. Yeah, did I cover it? What do you think?
No, I love it. I think, as we were speaking about the last two artists that brought in the written word, now we're kind of bringing the musical world with this. And I love that. I know, thinking back of all the submissions, I think we had over 400 submissions, and over 30 of them plus had performing arts, the written word. So unfortunately we couldn't have performing arts here, but I just want to recognize that these artists, I think, in their multi-dimensional way, they brought in some other aspects of art that is so important to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this just, once again, ties everything back to nature. We can call this our contemplative, reflective corner.
Yes.
The work is a little bit smaller, it's more intimate, and so I think it just kind of draws on some of the more reflective experiences that folks went through. We talk a lot about how COVID was a collective experience, but we all experienced it in slightly different ways, and so I think it's interesting to see this approach of going into nature to find that comfort and use your artistic practice as a self that way. All right, so we're gonna head around the corner here. Continuing with our nature theme. This is Stephen Tanasco. He is a photographer from Akron. And Stephen has this way of, he goes out into nature, but he brings with him, what kind of light was it again?
So not a lot of people bring lights to their outdoor photography of nature. So we went to do that studio visit with Stephen, and we were like, there's something unsettling about they're gorgeous and like vibrant, and they feel like there's something almost Stepford-ish to it, right?
Yeah,
and
Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah,
really
for sure.
Yeah.
A little on the edge. And he was like, I brought not only my fancy camera and nice and big, but also my lights. And so he's lighting these pieces in nature. So they're artificial light sources, which is what we were seeing and not understanding. And so there's this kind of off kilter, this gorgeous visual that just turned a little bit, and then once you understand that, it's even more exciting, to think about how that artist was holding a light and a camera and has to manage that. I love it.
Yeah, he talks a lot about how it takes a lot of trial and error, but he also, it's really fascinating how he fills the frame so you feel like you are just immersed in here. You can almost smell the blooms. And it's really interesting. Stephen also photographs crowds. So he does a lot of things at fairs and festivals and tailgates where he really gets in there and tries to be part of the crowd. And I think it's interesting how he has done that with his nature photographs as well. He fills everything to the edge. And what I love is that he talks a lot about how he doesn't remove the imperfections. You can see, Tina, we were talking earlier about the new life and the decomposition.
Yeah, we were sharing how, when we went through the pandemic, how many of us may have been feeling kind of, sad and withdrawn and, maybe crumpled in like some of the flowers show, but then also he's got some beautiful flowers that are showing, bright hope and a glow that we all are now feeling being here today. So yeah, it's great.
You ready to move?
Yeah.
Keep moving? Well, let's keep going down this wall here. Next we have Alyssa Workman. She's out of Beaver Creek, and she is a preschool arts teacher. She teaches at the Miami Valley School, which is fantastic. We love arts education here at the OIC, and she created these brilliant, bold floral compositions. I think it's interesting the different ways that everyone interprets nature and flowers. And Alyssa actually got into painting as a way to process grief and healing after her mother and sister passed away and her husband received a cancer diagnosis. And she talks a lot about how this was, again, it was a self, finding calm and comfort through practice. And she talks about wanting to bring joy to the viewer, which she clearly does with all of these bold colors. She's a geologist. She has a geology degree, which is fascinating. So she's very interested in patterns, which you can see, especially down here. There's definitely a lot of pattern work in her work.
Yeah. I love how she has these really bold strokes that, there's a frenetic patterning to it. But then she also has these quiet kind of ghostings that happen with the softer colors. And so that kind of dichotomy is really what makes these pieces shine for me, is this overlay, this kind of action again and again, a touching again and again, the way that you do in grief. Like it doesn't just, you touch it again and again, and sometimes it's softer and sometimes it's harder. And whether was something that the artist was thinking about, that's something I think about, knowing the history of this and that this truly was a salve for her, knowing that she touched this again and as a way to find joy.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that I love the fact that she wants to bring joy, and the thing that came to my mind was, when you're a singer, 'cause I enjoy singing, And when you sing, you want to bring a joyful noise to people, right? And that's what she's doing with her painting. She's bringing a joyful noise to everyone that looks at them. The other thing I noticed on this one in particular, how it has kind of the drizzle coming down from the flowers. It kind of, you know, it's not uniform, and it brings that sorrow in there a little bit, right? But at the same time, with all the wonderful, vibrant colors, you still feel, you know, that she wants to share something good.
Her titles are also some of my favorites. Like, this one is titled, She Made Rice Krispie Treats and Added Extra Marshmallows. Like, who doesn't love that? But having that, you think about that, and then you're thinking about those little details there as marshmallows. It automatically flips it for you. So, all right. So,
this transitions nicely as we come around. Can you go over here?
Sure.
As we come around the corner here, this is Lori Esposito. Lori is here in Columbus, and she works with a number of different materials, as you're about to see. I'll come in closer. I'm not being loud enough. So these are pieces of what Lori calls her evaporation walks, and they're basically meditative walking, and it's to help you process grief. She started these as an individual practice to process her own grief, and then she started doing them as group exercises. And Kat, do you want to talk a little bit about the process?
absolutely. So one, we're going to do this as our family and friends workshop. So if you have interest in this, come and see us. We're going to register for the event, and we'll have a good time together.
February 11th.
That's right. So what she does is she identifies the vessel, right? So thinking about what she's going to meditate on, who or what she's going to meditate on, finds the appropriate vessel and puts a little bit of water and maybe a little bit of alcohol and a dyeing thing, whether it's a natural dye like turmeric or something like that, or something more commercial she'll place in there. And then through the action of walking slowly, she'll, it moves and evaporates and makes these gorgeous, like, little wave lines. And so you see this history, right? That it just, how it was concentrated here for a while and it found its way to puddle there. It's just such a beautiful, ephemeral way to celebrate someone. So yeah.
I think it's interesting, part of the process when you're walking, the material inside washes up against the sides of the vessel, kind of like waves, and it ties in with waves of grief, right? It hits you at different points. Sometimes you're fine, and I think we all went through that during the pandemic too. Sometimes you're fine and then it'll just hit you. And so I think that it's interesting that that process is replicated through the walks.
The other thing I like about it is the fragility of it, the fact that there's no glaze on these, so that if anything touches it, it could basically vanish. So they're just very, very special, and just they have that daintiness to them.
Temporality. It's like very ephemeral, very temporary, which there's a lot of work here that does that. And before we go on, I know that someone has called out that maybe the sound is not synced. We apologize, bear with us. We're still saying good things. So come on over and we'll look at Lori's other work.
Speaking of ephemeral, Lori mentioned that she actually we talked earlier about some artists working in different mediums during COVID, and she transitioned a lot of her work to charcoal drawings. And this is a few of her pieces here. We were talking earlier about how this has such a liminal feel to it. We were all kind of hanging in the balance, not quite sure what was going to happen next. And Lori's work just illustrates that so perfectly. You can see here, she's got these just kind of everyday materials that you're surrounded by, just the mundane, where you're stuck, your charger cord, the still life of the bowl, but then she's got these outside places that she had talked about, that I had traveled to, gone on all these adventures, and now I'm just kind of hanging in the balance here. And Kat, I think you said something really nice earlier about not, when you're processing grief, you kind of get lost, you lose yourself in those moments. Can you?
Yeah, I saw, and I think Lori may have spoke about this. I hope she did. Anyhow, when you are experiencing grief, often you don't realize how you've gotten from one place to another, right? You get in the car and you drive for 20 minutes and you arrive and you have no idea how you got there. And this piece kind of speaks to that for me. It talks about like these little vignettes of memory and like kind of exiting out, minusing the bits in between, these kind of spots of recognition where we touch grief and can see or not see. Is that?
Yeah, that was, and I think, I would love to talk about this piece right here. This is, I think, a unanimous favorite of Lori's work. It's got this dreamlike, ethereal quality to it that it's just hard to even...
It's both inviting and a little haunting. Yeah. And it's so, like, I am so drawn to it. I feel like some sort of moth in the flame. Like, it's really lovely.
Yeah, her use of shadow and light and just some of these creatures that are, you know, out there in the shadows that we're not sure of. And Tina, I know this was
yes. Well, it's interesting because we have a dog that looks almost exactly like that dog in the picture. Yeah, I love how you can kind of see the water moving a little bit in the pool, and how there's just kind of like where, you know, what's going to happen with kind of, you know, the dog's on the edge, the lawn chairs are kind of just dangling. We're not really sure, but there's a lot of light focused in on the pool, but in the background there's just kind of this area where you feel like you're kind of just going to disappear in a way. Yeah. So it's really fascinating. I think it's a lovely piece.
Yeah, I think Lori really captured that in-between feel beautifully in all of her works. Yes. And what I also love is that these are so vastly different from her evaporation walks, but they still speak with the same voice. Like, it is that artist's voice, we have a couple of artists that have multiple approaches to their art, but it is absolutely their voice. So what a treat, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's head over here. Let's head on over here to our title wall. And Tom McGallis. He is a Cleveland-based mixed media artist, and Tom's studio, when we went on our studio visits, I have to say, Tom's studio was something else. He works out of an old elevator factory building in downtown Cleveland, and the entire place is filled with these giant works that he does on wood, on anything. And Tom is a storyteller at heart. You look at all of his pieces and they all tell just really fascinating stories. He has a background in filmmaking, animation, and radio, so you can kind of see where that comes from. It shines through in his work. This piece is called One Eye Blind. We were walking through the studio and this one really stuck out. And this actually tells the story. He had a cataract or some kind of eye issue really early on during the pandemic, and he went to the hospital to try and get some help for it, and unfortunately, or because of COVID, the hospitals were overrun and he was not able to be seen. So he went home and coped with that by painting his story. You can see his eye right here reflecting, and he's got all of these really bold colors and interesting materials. He uses nails and pieces of newspaper, and he's kind of got, we talked about a little bit of cubist elements to his work, and just, I don't know, it's just fascinating. Tom's work, it just grabs you. It just really grabs you and pulls you in. Yeah.
And he's got 3 works in this exhibition. I mean, this one, I adore it because it absolutely speaks to Picasso's Guernica. You know, it's just like, he has all of these indicators, all of these little bits that signal you to think about this or that, and it's just such a treat. So, yeah.
This is one of his. Tom tends to work on larger pieces, kind of like Kevin, but the pandemic forced him to spend some of his time at home, and he said this was less messy and less disruptive to his wife and cat to work with some smaller materials, some cleaner materials. So this is where this piece kind of came from, with just the enamel on paper. And this is so evocative of everything we think of when we think of what we were going through. The man, it almost looks like he's looking out the window, stuck inside, distancing, the happy birthday, washing your hands for the time it takes to sing happy birthday.
Yeah, this has a really clear connection to me to Cheryl's piece, the selfie in quarantine. Yeah, such a treat. And this is a supernatural progression to our next artist, Duarte, Richard Duarte Brown. He is a beacon of light. Yeah, Richard Duarte Brown, lovingly known as Duarte by everybody. So you will see numerous faces in all of his work. He is one of those artists that is such a community builder. He is also one of our teaching artists. Like, we could rattle off all of the awards and great things. And we were just thinking about the impact of Duarte as a teaching artist. Probably thousands. Easily thousands of people that have been deeply impacted by him and carry that forward in the world. Like, it's wild. So thinking about a beacon of light and someone that helps to bring joy in times of uncertainty, that is Duarte. And you see it in his work. You see him reflecting, holding a mirror up to people and showing them their beauty and amazingness, right? Like, we've got it all here. So yeah, he'll talk about it in the titles too. So Mudfoot, Derek Coles. Over here we've got Paisha for Paisha's Place, phenomenal local singer.
Yeah, I love Duarte. Anyone who has ever met Duarte, he is like, if a hug were a person, I think that would be how I would describe him. He really throws himself into everything he does, and he is so devoted to family and community and humanity, and all of those themes just course throughout his work. And I do love how he quite literally puts a bit of himself into every work. He's immersed. That he does. You can see him. He has this image. You can find it as a through line through all of his work, which I just absolutely love. He also works with a lot of different materials. He talks about how, oftentimes we discard things that still have value, a lot of value, and he'll put those into his paintings. And he also talks about, there's members of the community that get discarded when they still have a lot of value. And Duarte is just somebody who will bring everyone in, and he sees the good in everyone, and that just shines through in all of his work.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal mentor to so many folks. And getting to visit his studio was another reflection of that. I want to talk about someone that is always making work. I so admire the artist that can always make it. He is always making. It is his art. His house is full of art. It's amazing.
What I love about this piece is it really reflects his love for children. And if you see the little boy writing on, clearly he's doing some homework, or the one that's carrying the backpack, it's evident that he's a teacher. He cares about education. He cares about helping kids, and that, all the different expressions, we feel all these different emotions that he's showing in this painting. So I just love that you can tell how much he adores kids and wants to help them. And obviously, when we talked about all the people he's impacted, I mean, when you impact just one person, you impact many, because that impact spreads like a ripple effect. So it's wonderful that we have a man like Duarte in our community.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about it, but he has received the award, the Governor's Award for Art Education. So other people may know it too.
He's certainly worthy.
Absolutely. And he has a couple more pieces around this way, so lots to come and look at and enjoy. He even has an ode to Amina Robinson made out of a music box that's really tender and loving. with a little spool around the body. It's just so smartly done. You have more to discover when you look at Duarte's work. You just look a little longer and you're going to discover more things. We were doing that particularly with this piece a little earlier. We were like, and then what's that? And then what's that?
Yeah.
So many details. And this is a really great transition around the corner. They're now friends. I think they have a great kind of artist relationship from Duarte to Eris Cohen. Okay, do you want to start us off on Eris?
Sure. So Eris is an artist who's based here in Columbus, and he is just a really fantastic person as well. As Kat was mentioning, he has kind of taken up the mantle under Duarte's mentorship and has been giving back to the community as well. But Eris uses a lot of really bold colors in his artwork here. I'd like to focus on, I think, this one, Resolution. We were talking about this earlier. You can notice that the ear is flipped, and as Tina pointed out earlier, the mouth is also highlighted, and so this really speaks to communication. Tina, you had some really lovely things.
I just think that, it shows he enlarged the ear. The ear's turning a different direction, and maybe he's trying to say in this work that we should listen more. And sometimes when we listen, we may not necessarily hear it the way that a person expressed it, and so we should think about it. So maybe listening a little bit more than we're using our mouth and speaking. And as you notice, the mouth is kind of closed. So I think that he's just sharing this, idea that, we should really listen to each other, hear each other. And I think his work is speaking very loudly to us. I love the realism of his work. That speaks to me. And if you looked through the stack and saw these images, you may have thought these were photographs, but they're certainly not. They're original paintings and very, very beautifully done.
Yeah. And so conceptually, we make a really lovely jump into our next artist, which is Karen Snoffer. And Karen is out in Gambier, Ohio. And Karen actually has 3 pieces. And we'll start over here with Orange Alert. So while Katie and I were doing our visit with Karen, she had all this amazing artwork, and we were just going through all of it, enjoying it, and then this was kind of tucked away in the back, and I was like, what's that? And she told us the story of this piece, and I think it really struck both Katie and me that it was a piece that she had started ages ago, that she had started with these drawings. And she had put it away for a while, and then brought it back out and realized it through abstraction, tore it up, added things, moved things around. And I think that's what's so impressive to me about Karen's work is her willingness to disregard what other artists might feel is too precious to go back into. She goes without abandon. It's amazing how she's willing to work and rework. And I just think it's this is another artist, again, she has varieties of material she's working with, but it is all absolutely her voice. So as we turn and have a look at Tableau, is that the title? Tell me the title one more time.
Afternoon, her courtyard escape.
It is
a tableau of sorts, yes.
But I think, so Tina had mentioned something that I didn't really think about, the fact that with each installation of this installation, it's different. There's a ephemerality to it just by the nature of the pieces and bits that are on the wall can't be the same. You can't take that. You can't take our wall with you. So you have to reinstall and reimagine.
Yeah, it's painted. It's literally painted on the wall. So we were just saying that, she came in here. It took her 3 days to put this together, and she painted that, and that will eventually leave the gallery, and it will never be again. And we were talking about kind of the temporary nature of things, and everything's a little temporary. We kind of felt that through COVID as well.
And I just think it's a stunning piece just to include, I love how she's kind of include the earth, even kind of an earth-like, or maybe it's a moon, I don't know exactly what she was thinking, but it's just kind of like, we're almost in orbit, you know, and we're all feeling all these different emotions as we're looking at everything she has in this installation. It's incredible.
Yeah, speaking of the different emotions, one of the things I love so much about Karen's work is the colors elicit joy. She's got the yellow. She works a lot with black and white, but then she puts the yellow in there, which is obviously a joyful color. But she also talked a little bit about it also being kind of acidic, which creates that contrast. And so there's this push and pull and a little bit of tension in all of her pieces. It's not a bad thing. It's not, tension's not always a bad thing.
Right.
But I just love that contrast that she brings in, and some of the negative shapes that are created by the work that she does. It's just about her whole process is so fascinating to me. I just love that she, like you said, nothing is too precious. She's willing to get in there and tear it up for the greater good. So
yeah, I like how it feels like you're kind of walking in a pathway through the piece, but on the other hand, some of it feels very, sharp corners, and then there's also a lot of softness to it, and it's kind of like life, right? We got these sharp corners that we go around sometimes, and then we also have a lot of softness, and it's good to kind of recognize both a little
Absolutely.
bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, it wouldn't read the same if it was all sharp or all soft.
Right.
Yeah. And then finally this small piece. I mean, again, it is her voice. It's, Cursive Tower. And you can just see there's no mistaking that this is the same artist. That's super impressive to me.
yeah.
So.
To go from the 2D to the 3D, it just that, Karen was a dancer, and so she does that dance, which I think is fascinating as well.
Yeah, it definitely has movement to it, no doubt.
Yeah.
And over here we have Chris Sanger. He's a photographer in Pickerington. Chris's work is so interesting. Speaking of deconstruction, Chris takes florals, plants, flowers, things like that, and pulls all the petals off, and then he meticulously places them on his, board in his studio and photographs them, which you think about the patience and the precision and the amount of time that it would take to do something like this. And it's so interesting how you're, sticking things very steadily and precisely, but it creates so much movement in the photo as a whole. So this one's called Bombardment. I just love this piece. Tina, you want to?
Oh no, I love how, every petal is placed so perfectly, yet not. And how nothing really is touching the other than a little corner I found. There's one touching, but it kind of made us kind of feel as we were going through COVID that we really couldn't touch each other. We shouldn't be close to one another. But yeah, on the other hand, we needed each other, and this just has such a nice movement to it, just so eye-catching, from the distance. Just the painstaking time it must have taken him to place each and every one of these petals is incredible.
Well, in COVID, he may have had time.
That's true. Yeah. It had a little extra time.
The undulating, that's not easy to do, right?
Yeah.
And in each of these pieces, there's something kind of personified, right? Whether it's anthropomorphized flowers or, a mask that has flowers growing out of it. Just really smartly, well done. It's great to have these in the exhibition.
Absolutely.
And then,
Next, we have Cody Miller. Cody's work epitomizes Arts Beacon. Cody deals a lot with the subjects of darkness and light and giving and receiving grace, and you'll see that reflected in a lot of his work. A lot of his work shows people on a journey and finding beauty in things that are maybe painful or sorrowful. I think it's interesting, his work kind of has this sorrowful mood to it when you first look at it, but then upon a closer look, you start to see signs of hope and light. And I want to kind of come over here really quick and draw attention to this one. This is Box of Darkness into Light 5. It's part of a series that he did about darkness and light. It's a version of, oh, thank you. It's a version of what he submitted to the Arts Beacon. So Cody was one of the very first people that we submitted on, or that we showcased on Arts Beacon, just because his work so exemplified what we were going through. And this piece I love so much. There's a lot of inspiration from scripture and poetry and music in Cody's work, and this piece was actually inspired by a Mary Oliver poem, and the quote was, "Someone I loved once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this too was a gift." And you know, we've been talking about these inadvertent gifts from COVID, and that, I mean, yeah, it takes some time to kind of process what you've been given. There's a lot of birds, ravens, and crows. You'll see a lot of those, that symbolism in Cody's work. And it's kind of collecting pieces of people, and the string, you'll see strings in some of the other pieces we'll get to, where it's those making those human connections. Yeah.
Cody's Precipice, the Precipice was based on Catcher in the Rye, and like it made me want to read Catcher in the Rye all over after he talked about it, and like read the
when a body catch a body, that's what this is. And I thought, I read that book wrong. I need to go back and
I need to read it like that. Yeah. And Cody's going to do an artist talk, so stay tuned for that. The way that he is able to help folks on the journey with how he has come to these. He's one of those artists that absolutely has the idea before he's going in. I am sure that things change, obviously, but they're so deeply rooted in those quotes that it's just lovely to think about how that comes to fruition. They're collaged and painted. And collage is not easy. I don't know if any of you have tried collage. It's not easy.
It isn't easy. As a matter of fact, this piece that we were talking about earlier, the box of darkness into light, if you look at the bear, it is a collage. It looks like I think it's a string or maybe even just kind of glue or something. I'm not really sure what it is, but he uses that to kind of create the dimension of the bear's fur, if you will. But one other thing I've noticed in all of his paintings is just, first of all, there's this feeling of being loved and being held, and he's holding, something's being held almost in every one of his paintings, and to me that's kind of a shared humanity thing that we all need, and we certainly needed during COVID, and it's comforting for me to see his art.
Yeah. Thinking about art as the great communicator, it's the language beyond language. And the other piece to it is that art is the greatest consensus builder. So you think about like how you build that from, I mean, just exactly that like how do we be together better? Like how do we think? How do we elasticize our minds around concepts that are being proposed through imagery? And it's much better through conversation, I have to say. This has been great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's turn the corner.
So next we have Linda McClanahan. Linda is just one of those absolutely fascinating artists. Everything about her, you just can't help but love. She works in, one-shot enamel paint, which was...
It's the same thing that you use for, like when you pinstripe cars, it's the same kind of thing. So when you look at these paint strokes, the quickness that you have to have.
Yeah, it dries very quickly.
Oh my goodness. And she has to wear a mask while like this is some finicky material that she has bound herself to and clearly is a master at using. It also boggles my mind any amount of rendering she's able to do, because you can't really like mix it.
You can't mold it, you can't fix it. Once it's down, it's down.
It's down. But I also, this is another artist that, actually every single artist in here has a very clear voice. But when you see a Linda McClanahan, you know a Linda McClanahan. And we were talking about snake marriage and how it is such an embodiment of the experience many of us had with our partners at home of like, really nice to be in that space, but also maybe at each other's throat.
Yeah,
You are entangled, whether you like it or
right,
not.
right. A little challenging, but yet a lot of closeness.
Yeah.
And the other thing I love about her art is there's a lot of movement. You know, you really feel the movement and kind of, you know, things are going different directions, and we're really not sure exactly what direction. It's the same thing we felt with COVID, but this painting she produced. The heart of it all she produced for the exhibit here. So this is a wonderful new painting of hers in 2022. Just maybe finished it before. Yeah. So this is a great kind of compilation of different things about Ohio and some things that she may have been feeling or thinking about. So it's kind of interesting.
And I also love, so we have another painting of hers that, she's so smart about it, she created a painting that's basically snakes and ladders. And then she also created vinyl prints that we have one on the table so you can play snakes and ladders if you'd like to. We had a poetry or a writing workshop last night, and someone was talking about the fact that, you know, snakes and ladders is a great inclusion within this exhibition because there's no real way to like win it. Like you can't come in and like through strategy win at snakes and ladders. And so like we were talking about the game of life and how that felt so prescient for the time of COVID, right?
Yeah, a lot about talking about chance and how nothing is guaranteed, and that just ties in so beautifully.
Yeah, the images are just such a wide variety, and I think it kind of brings in pretty much everyone, right? We all have kind of a different feeling, different thought, different thing that we engaged with, and I feel like she kind of did that very nicely.
For sure. And then we have one last artist that we're going to talk about, and then we're going to kind of talk about how this show happened. And this last artist is ceramicist Terry Kern from Cincinnati, Ohio. And you have to come and see these in person. To see them in digital images, they're amazing. But to see them in person and recognize the preciousness of them, the amount of detail, the extraordinary craftsmanship, it'll just kind of, it floors me. I had the great honor of getting to unwrap them. And, I was able to touch them and, look at the bottom of them. And even the bottom is rendered in the way that you see here.
Wow.
It just, not only are these forms magnificently thrown and altered, but also decorated. And I'll stop talking so that Katie and Tina can talk a little bit. I'll just go on and on. But
Sure, so you'll notice that Terry's work is, like Pat mentioned, it's incredibly detailed and it is full of symbolism. Every single vessel tells a story. The first one here, The Dragon Within, was actually the piece that Terry submitted to Arts Beacon, and it resonated with a lot of people. She talks about how dragons represent the need to be fierce and strong, and how she needed to channel that energy as a caregiver for a family member during COVID, which a lot of people can identify with. You'll also see when you come in here, she's got several birds. Birds represent the artist herself and also strong female characters in her life. She's got, let's see what else we have. There's some chairs which represent a safe place to fall. Everything has very detailed meaning. Everything is very purposeful. And it's just interesting to take some time, spend some time with each piece and try and figure out the story that she's trying to tell for yourself.
And she's going to do an artist talk, so if you want more of that, which I promise you will be a great artist talk. I got a little preview. It's going to be great. We have 5 great artist talks coming up. Yeah, Tina, you had mentioned a couple of things.
Yeah, well, if anyone has ever gone to paint your own pottery sort of experience, which many people have, and a lot of us aren't artists and don't understand what goes into painting pottery, but I mean, the intricate detail that she has placed on these pieces is absolutely incredible. And of course, the story that she emotes from each of them is also a wonderful thing, but you know, and I love the pop of color that she puts in each of them. It makes it, you know, visually appealing. But certainly the detail, it's clear it's taking her a very long time to do these. I mean, this is not something that you get done in a week. And to fire it and make sure it looks the way it does without any sense of error, if you will. They're so precise. It's one of the most, in my view, stunning pieces here in this exhibit.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So those are the 17 artists, and we'll come around here and we'll just chat with you a little bit about, so Tina, COVID happened, right? And you got on the horn, you called up Donna.
I did.
The executive director of the Ohio Arts Council. What happened?
So we were in probably maybe a month or so, and I felt like the walls were closing in on me. I am not a bird to be caged, okay? So this was hard for me. And I started thinking about all the things that were happening to people, and in particular our arts community, and how they weren't going to be able to do their shows, and how they weren't going to be able to show their work the way that we were used to showing them. So I called Donna and I said, what can we do? We have to do something to make people feel some hope or an opportunity to get their work out there. So that is the work that the group of the Ohio Arts Council came up with. I cannot say it was my idea for the Beacon of Light title, which I love, by the way. But I'm so thankful to Kat and to Katie and to Donna and the whole team at the Ohio Arts Council, because it was a great idea, and now we have the culmination of that idea here today, and where people all across the state and maybe the country will come and see this incredible work that we have as Ohio artists. And as I mentioned before, we have 400 artists that, you know, put in their work, and some of them were more creative with performing arts and the written word. Unfortunately, we can't necessarily show all that here, but we are so thankful for all of those people that took the time and wanted to share, most importantly, and give each other hope in that beacon of light. So thanks. Yeah.
That seed of inspiration, really, it was so special to get to see that community to come together, and truly the shepherd of that was Katie. So Katie, you want to chat a little bit about that and the experience of?
Sure, so I'll give a little bit of background. I think people are probably like, what was this Arts Beacon thing? So we've talked about it. We wanted to give artists a place to connect and cope, and the way that we did that was through a platform on our website where artists could submit through the submission form their artwork and tell their narratives. And then we had an Instagram account where we would go through and curate and decide to post different images each day. And it was such a fascinating experience to see. We talked a little bit about, you know, everyone was going through this really rough time, and we weren't sure. And Tina, you talked about this a little bit about not really being able to feel creative or get into it. So we weren't sure what kind of response we would get. And it was amazing. I mean, we were fortunate to have you and Lieutenant Governor John Husted announce this during one of Governor DeWine's press conferences. And after that video went out, hundreds of responses poured in. And it was just so interesting to see how people were interacting, not only, you know, by sharing their work, but interacting with others. I talked a little bit about that with Molly's post. But just seeing how the community was coming together from far away to support one another. And Tina mentioned there were performing arts, there were literary arts, there were multimedia, digital, everything. And Arts Beacon account is still up on Instagram. If anybody's interested, you can see all of those. It's at Ohio Arts Beacon on Instagram. We're no longer accepting submissions. It's naturally sunsetted, as you can imagine. But if you want to go and take a look and see what some of the other entries looked like, we encourage you to check that out.
So, you know, we have the great honor of having Donna Collins as our executive director, and it astounds me regularly how she's able to kind of dial out and think about the big picture and make connections. And so, you know, we had this great inspiration from Tina. We had it shepherded by Katie. And Donna, you know, I was having a touch base with Donna, and she was like, we should probably have a capstone exhibition of Arts Weekend. You know, when COVID's over in 23. Or, you know, hoping, right?
Yes.
And how smart is that, right? So naturally, Katie was the right selection as curator, being so involved and knowledgeable about the work. And you had a tall order to narrow down to something that could fit in this space. Ooh, she worked really, it was very tough. So many things came into how those works were selected. We thought a lot about diversity through the state, like geographically, making sure that we represented folks that submitted, and also medium, like how people were approaching their art. It was so neat to watch it come together and get to work with you and see these, and the generosity of these artists is just phenomenal. They immediately were, yes, you know, and yes, come and visit me if you can, or if you can't, let's get onto Zoom. It was just such a treat.
It was what we talk about, just filled our cup in ways that we never could have imagined getting out. And I just want to say thank you to Kat, because Kat gives me a lot of credit. I am not a curator by you know, in my normal day job. I'm a communications strategist. But I have learned so much through this exhibition. So Tina, thank you so much for giving this opportunity, coming up with the idea. We are super lucky to have you as a board member. It's really incredible to have someone who's super tuned in and so invested. We're very, very lucky. And Kat, you know, Kat showed me the ropes, and she kept encouraging me, like, you have the tools that it takes to get this done. And so it was just really, really great to have you by my side, and your support and your friendship and your guidance has just been invaluable. So.
I loved that when you were chatting about it, you, as a communication specialist, strategist, both things. You talked about how you were impacted by the narrative. Like, absolutely, the visual is so important, but also the stories that these artists told. I think that there were a few gifts that we were given from a time that was really uncertain. And one of them was deep introspection, and willingness to be a little more vulnerable and share with each other and have that kind of consensus. And I think that's really beautifully presented here. So thank you all for joining us. Big thank you to the governor's office, the legislature, the Ohio Arts Council's board, Tina especially, and for supporting the Ohio Arts Council, this space, and of course, Ohio artists. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.